She started off on phenobarbital. She was 6 weeks old at that point, and she was on that for about 6 months. And during that 6 months, she continued to scream and not sleep, and except for about an hour a day, where she would finally settle down and sleep. And then at that point, the phenobarbital, like they had to increase the doses, and it just wasn't doing a good job of controlling the seizures. Our oldest son, he is 3 years older than his sister. And so he was, of course, a little, but he was able to identify a seizure right away. But the crying really got to him. He hated seeing his baby sister being happy. And at that point, after months of it, we knew there's just nothing that we could do that would make her happy. But he would beg me, "Mommy, do something, she's crying." And I said, "There's just nothing I can do. I don't know what to do for her." And I didn't at that point know what was going to make that stop. I honestly thought this could go on forever. I mean, it really seemed like that would be the case, that she would always have that and cry. And part of me thought, what did I do to our family that now, this is what we'll have to have forever? I mean, she's not happy. And I remember getting emotional one Christmas when she was crying, and everybody was offering suggestions. Oh, she has colic. She gets her days and nights confused, roll her around in a blanket, all of these old wives' tales that people were telling me. And it's like, you aren't understanding, you aren't seeing the problem. And I remember just yelling out, like, if anybody wants to take her home and give her a try and see if they can make her happy, okay, because obviously I can't do it. I just knew that I couldn't make her happy. My husband couldn't make her happy. And nobody took me up on the offer. Things like taking her places, not knowing if we have a big trip planned. Is she going to have a seizure that morning? Is she going to be more tired? We want to go to the amusement park today. For me, taking her by myself, now that she's an adult, even though she's a small adult, if we go someplace and see she has a seizure, am I going to be able to get her someplace safe? Am I going to be able to get her back to the car? We've reached the point where she's about 90 pounds now. So for me, I can pick her up and carry her, but not for very far, not for very long. So those kind of things were always a little more difficult, not knowing if we were going to be able to do what we needed to do. My other boys play sports, and there'd be times where we need to leave early in the morning, and she's had that tendency for seizures early in the morning. And I remember on one occasion, I was trying to get the boys breakfast. We needed to leave in 10 minutes. She's on the floor having a seizure. Her older brother is tending to her. My husband is tending to the two younger boys because my younger boy had an issue that he was having that morning. And I looked around at the chaos, and I started laughing. And my son looks at me and he says, "What part of this is funny?" And I said, "We're a mess. It's just absolute chaos in our house right now. And we're leaving in 10 or 15 minutes. So those kind of things was always been a little more difficult. She does not speak, though she does understand very well and attempts to communicate. She has great nonverbal communication skills, and she can usually find a way to get her point across. The hardest thing is if I can tell like she's not feeling well, she isn't always able to give me a good idea of what is wrong. That's a very hard thing for her. And I usually try to tell her, find a way to show me. And sometimes she's able to, point at her foot or something like that to let me know this is where my problem is. But that isn't always real consistent. We have decided the best way for us to do the diet. There's certain foods that are like go-to foods for Sierra that my husband can make, my sons can make in a pinch. So like tuna salad, chicken salad, those things. Those are the go-to meal if she's not able to have something that we are making for dinner that night. The way I generally do it, if we're having like a taco night, I will separate out a little bit of the taco meat for Sierra. I'll season hers separate so I can control the amount of seasoning that's put in it. And then I make her cauliflower rice, and then I continue to make the dinner. So I try to use parts of what we're having for dinner for her meals when possible. And if I can't figure out a way to take the meal that we're having and adapt it to her, or if we're having something that she physically wouldn't be able to eat, like she has, doesn't chew a lot. So if it's just not possible, then we switch to a go-to meal for her. Pretty much every time we leave the house, we have a cooler with her with acceptable foods. If we go out to dinner, we try to find her something at the restaurant and choose restaurants that we know. At this point, after 2 years, we know certain places she can eat and certain places that she can't. So we try to pick places that we know has something that she's going to be able to have. But if not, we resort to the cooler. And we do the same thing for family events. My side of the family, generally, when we have like a holiday, everybody brings a dish. And there's a few people in the family that have learned what they can use, swapping out a type of mayonnaise, doing this differently. And so if they make something for everybody to share, they bring a little bowl of something very similar for Sierra, or something without the seasoning or the sauce that she can have. And it's so wonderful to see people do that for her. And then the other side is a little more distant relatives who aren't as familiar. And we've had some issues with, if I ask, has any sauce or seasoning or, any marinades, I'm told no, but then come to find out it did. So we're being very careful in those situations. And we just are using her cooler meal, unless we know for a fact that the food was basically prepared with her in mind. That we know we can't trust it, and we need to just have her eat something out of the cooler. I remember on one occasion, I got her a plate of ham that I thought would be acceptable for her, and she was eating it. And then I sat down and took one bite of mine, and I could taste the brown sugar in it. And I remember I ripped her plate away from her, and I made her so mad because she's like mid grabbing a piece, and I just ripped her plate away, and I was like, no. And she had already had a couple, and she got so mad at me. But it was like, I give it to one of the other kids. I'm like, get rid of this, throw it away, get it out of her sight. And we went right towards the cooler. We need the cooler, get her something to eat, because she's really mad at me right now for ripping her dinner away from her. But yeah, so we've learned how to adjust in those situations. And then when my sons have their sporting events, we pack the cooler and take her foods with her, and I'll be feeding her right on, they swim, so I'm feeding her right on the pool deck, and just off the wall things. And people probably look at me funny because I have Jello and spray Cool Whip to put on there for a little fat at the side of the pool. I'm spraying whip on some Jello. I've gotten some looks, but it works for us. She did get a new teacher this year. So like I had to re-explain how the diet was working to the teacher. Although he was somewhat familiar with the diet, he had never had a kid that in his class to be on the diet. He was familiar with it. And I trust that he's doing everything properly at school. He did catch me off guard a few weeks ago, and it was right before our Thanksgiving holiday. And he said, "Oh, well, she can take that day off, right?" I was just kind of shocked. I was like, no, there's no days off. She doesn't get a freebie day to eat whatever she wants. I'm like, this is every day. This is what she has to do. And he seemed so surprised. And I thought, well, I thought you understood that. I thought he knew that because he's low carb for other reasons. And so maybe for him, he can take the day off, but there is no day off. This is the lifestyle that she has. This is the food that she has to choose from. And this is what she eats on a holiday. We will try to adapt it as best we can, but it doesn't matter what day of the year it is. This is what we're doing. it is hard, especially at first, but eventually you learn to live with it and adapt to it. And today, like, we could go anywhere. I wouldn't hesitate to, take her on vacation or whatever, knowing that we had the diet to contend with. It's just certain things that we would have to plan ahead of time. And I think that after 2 years on the diet, we've adapted well to those kind of challenges. And I'm glad of the place that we're at right now. And I really would encourage anybody to not hesitate. If you're considering it, find out more and give it a shot.